outside playing pickleball, and sometimes I'm wearing, like, it's snowing. It's the
Right.
weirdest time.
Is JJ going to join us,
Yeah,
John?
JJ, he was at a meeting. One of Maury's friends came over here, and JJ was on cue. Maury, she was flabbergasted by that. JJ, for those who don't know, we have a blue friend of the Amazon parrot. So he's quite a character. So Julian, can you hear us? Okay.
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, and we got Audrey. Okay, so. All righty, and you said Mason Cole's trying to get in, but I don't see him, Bill. So we're gonna get going. All right. So it's more than an office facility. It represents your culture. Today we're featuring Bill Himmelstein. Bill, I'll let Bill say a little bit about himself, but I brought him in because he's an extremely good connector. He also understands the power of culture. This is part of our Power of Culture series. My name is John Ruh. I'm here for you today. I'll be facilitating it. So, Bill, tell the people that don't know you a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I grew up in Kansas City, went to school in St. Louis, came to Chicago after I graduated in 2000. I've been in commercial real estate ever since as a broker representing the end user of commercial real estate. So the business owner, the C-level executive, whether it's office, industrial, warehouse space. We do buy and sell side, tenant representation, sale leasebacks, any transactional commercial real estate work, both Chicagoland area and across the nation. We can support businesses.
Mm-hmm. So for those who haven't been to any of our sessions, these are facilitated interactive conversations geared for you and your questions. So, Bill, the first question I have is, and then we'll piggyback on that, what does this actually mean? It's more than an office facility, represent your culture. You know, I need space. How much does it cost? I mean, what is it actually, why do you say that and talk about it like that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people think office space is a place to go and do work. But I think through the pandemic, it's been proven that we can get work done anywhere. So what's the point of having office space where you're bringing your people together? And really, the ultimate purpose of office space is to build that culture. It's to collaborate. It's to build relationships. It's to mentor. It's, essentially supports the growth of your business is what it's designed to do. That's the purpose of it.
What about you, Amy? What do you have to say? What questions you came here to listen to Bill? What did you want to ask him? What's your thoughts about that?
I mean, I think he's spot on. I think now more than ever, that's the key, is that, I'm always trying to sell that culture. Right. And so that's the biggest part about when you go into a new office is like, what is the culture and how is it going to look like and what's it going to feel like? So I think now more than ever, I'm just curious to hear what he has to say. I guess, it's just interesting to hear everyone's different perspectives of that. I feel like the market is going in different directions between people who are hybrid and remote and in the office. So I think it's changed a lot.
What about you, Audrey? What did you came here to listen to Bill? Anything you want to comment on that, or anything you want to ask Bill? We're here. Bill's going to answer our questions. So I'm going to ask a few, but if you have specific questions, you ask them. Go ahead, Audrey.
For me, I work with caregivers personally, and right now there's been a lot of caregiver burnout that's going on. It's very hard for care teams to find people who are willing to stay around. Right now, the issue with our office space that we have is it's very outdated. We're waiting on the building that we're working with to be able to, get things renovated and everything. And I'm just wondering what the best way is to kind of deal with that that period in between where you're in that waiting period, and how to make sure that the culture stays positive, even if you're not in the best space.
Bill, you want
that's a really good question, because having the wrong space can also be a detriment to your culture, and it can discourage people from coming in. And so that's a really good question, Audrey, is what to do when you're kind of stuck in a lease. There's a couple of levers that you can pull, one of which is if you had a good broker negotiate your lease, then you probably have a right to terminate. Those are great pieces of leverage to exercise when you're actually, trying to get the landlord to either renovate a property or to go ahead and, terminate the lease and get to another space. Oftentimes you can get a new landlord to cover your termination penalty at your old building to get you into their new building. But if you don't have a right to terminate, the other thing that I would recommend is really keeping close records on things the building should be doing but are not doing. Maintaining the property, keeping it safe, keeping it clean, fixing issues when they arise, just doing the things that they're supposed to be doing based upon the lease agreement, keeping a record of that, because the purpose of doing that is you could be able to break your lease if you've got decent records of the landlord not living up to the lease agreement. So I can get into more detail, but those are my two. If you don't have a right to terminate, then keep a record of things the landlord's not doing that they should be, like replacing light bulbs, keeping the water running, keeping the lights out, just different things that a landlord is responsible for delivering to remain in compliance with the lease.
Hey, Bill, what does your research or tendencies say about working from home versus working in office? Which direction is that arrow going? And talk about, since you talked about getting together, people getting together, and Bill knows a lot about the DISC tool, by the way, and the eye profile. So explain a little bit about that and the tendencies that you see happening.
Yeah, so first of all, if you look on the internet, you could find information that'll tell you anything that you want to know, right? If you believe that no one's going to ever come back to the office, you can find an article that says no one's ever going to come back. If you believe that everyone is going to be back in the office, you'll find an article that says everyone's coming back. So what the research from the people that I trust, trusted resources, hybrid work is here to stay. That's not going anywhere. We're almost 5 years removed from the start of the pandemic, and we're in the mid 50% range of occupancy versus pre-pandemic levels. If you ask business owners, which I do every day, asking them directly, I would say around 90% or higher would like their employees to be in more. And the reason is because they feel they can build a stronger culture that way. Having their people together in person helps build a stronger culture, which in turn helps build a stickier environment, keeps your employees around longer, and ultimately you have happier employees that deliver better work product to your clients, which means you then have better clients, and that's better for your business. But if you poll employees, which I admittedly don't talk to as much, non-decision makers, they all want to be at home as much as possible in general. So you've got this dichotomy of, the management team and the C-level executives want their people to come in more, and the people themselves don't want to come in as much. And interestingly enough, it's led by the younger generation in the workforce, which most of us would agree that they are the exact type of people that should be in the office, that should be, walking down the hall to talk to the guys like Maury and John, people with experience, and getting information from them and learning from them, getting a work ethic from them. A lot of the statistics, John, would also say that those that work from home aren't as productive. That's a more trickier one because you're going to find a lot of research on both sides of the table. But again, when you ask the management team, the C-suite, are people more productive in the office or out? They will almost always tell you they're more productive in the office. But productive for the C-suite means productive on the business. But the team members think, well, I'm extremely productive at home. It's just 50% for the business and 50% for myself personally, because I'll go to the gym in the middle of the day. I'll do my grocery shopping in the middle of the day. I'll take my dog for a couple of walks. They're going to do things that aren't necessarily what they're getting paid for. But yeah, it's a wonderful convenience to have if you only have to get work done 50% of the working hours. So, yeah, go ahead.
So, so for what it's worth, TTI research would tell you worldwide that the most dominant profile are the people, the high eyes, the people pleasers, and they collaborate. They actually create by collaboration, face to face, so that. And the second is the security oriented people, which need structure. So why I bring that up, Bill, and I'm going to let somebody else, is that the design, when I refer, Bill, to my clients that are more than cost oriented and culture, I say you want to design this office to be appropriate for the kind of people you have, so you increase productivity. Maury, you want to say something?
Yeah, I'd like to get into more of a discussion of what the office space means in terms of culture. Is it water coolers? Is it a coffee maker? Is it an environment where there's a couch and a seat? Is it a place where we can have conversations? Is it an area where we make people feel like they almost are at home, so they get some of that same thing that they get out of their home? What are the physical things that contribute to culture in an office? And Bill, you're probably primed on exactly what the answers are to this. So it's not.
And no, I appreciate the softball there. It's what the biggest changes that I've been seeing, and you're spot on, Maury. It's really about creating more of a comfortable home-like environment, but with better conveniences at the office. And so, pre-pandemic, we were certainly seeing a shift towards larger kitchenettes with more open space and open area for people to kind of hang out. That's that water cooler, the coffee, people are kind of hanging out in that area. But certainly that has been accelerated in the post-pandemic world. The fact that the kitchen is now like the focal point of the office, and that kitchenette just is a wide open. It opens up to the entire space. There's a lot of comfortable seating. It's not just a high top table to scarf down some food and get back to work. Now it's really about comfortable seating, places for team members to gather. And it's not always just talking about work and, whatever clients or issues that they're facing, but it's also about bonding with your teammates. And, hey, what'd you do this weekend? What are you going to be doing this weekend? What's going on with your boyfriend or your husband or your children or whatever it is? It's about getting those employees to bond with each other, which in turn makes that job more sticky. When you have a remote employee, essentially what you have is a mercenary. You're paying someone to fight for you. But if someone else comes along and says, I'm going to give you more money, boom, they're gone. You lose those people immediately because they have got no real relationships with people in the office and on the team. And so you just don't have that cohesive of a culture when all of your people are remote and don't have a chance to bond and form a relationship. But what you do get in the office is exactly that. And the kitchen is where it's all starting, Maury. I know as an avid chef yourself and a wonderful host of gatherings, it's all about the food, right? The food and the kitchen brings people together, and that's now translating into the office space 100%.
So, Nora, what comments or questions you want to ask Bill?
Well, for context, this is my first time working in an office setting, has been this past year. So learning all this information is new to me. But one thing that I do think about is within company culture is who are your employees and what generation are they from? I think all the generations are motivated by different things. And one thing that it is common is that we're switching to this open format concept where you're not in an actual office and you're trying to replicate it to feel like home, but everybody needs their own space. Like the concept of human beings needing a sense of belonging in space is essential. And so if you don't have your own personal office within the office, just like at home, if you didn't have your bedroom, how are you going to overcome that?
I want to just piggyback on that because I think that's a relevant thing that I do with Bill. So this designing the space in a way that increases retention and recruitment is critical. For example, I have a client that has a lot of very anal, detail-oriented people, and they do not want this wide open public spaces. And so they design, and they're doing a lot of analytical work, so they design more privacy because it fits the nature of their business. Now, that gets way beyond dollars and cents on a lease, but Bill actually deals with that. Any comment you have or experience you want to mention, cases like that?
Well, but Nora's very experienced this as well, as she's with a construction company that's building out these spaces. But, you know, something that people forget about is the cost of replacing somebody. You know, when you've got a team member that leaves, there's a big cost associated in replacing them, training them up, and getting them up to speed. So one of the most affordable and best things a business owner can do is retain their existing team members, assuming that they're A and B, you know, at least B players. But in terms of having that private space, I think what I'm seeing more so is that companies are saying, yeah, the home, that's your private space. That's where you can bang out the work and get it done in peace and quiet. But in general, right, this is just kind of generalizing all different industries, because they do vary across industries, how people use space. But in general, I'm seeing offices are now being used more as that gathering of the people, the collaboration, the training, the team building type of stuff. But I agree with Nora. I think it is important for people to be able to have that separation. Like, okay, great, we've collaborated, we've come up with a plan, and now I've got work to deliver. Well, it's kind of, I've always felt that it's been a little bit more difficult to do that when you're in a bullpen, right? With just people jammed shoulder to shoulder. And that's where we were pre-pandemic, is we had this trend of how many of our people can we jam into this space? A perfect example, when I started in commercial real estate almost 25 years ago, average square feet per employee across all industries was about 650 square feet per person. Fast forward to right before the pandemic, that number had dropped to about 190 square feet per person. We were just packing them in like sardines. And to Nora's point, I don't think that was great for culture. It was great for trying to save money and have, you know, that lower cost per person. But now one of the trends that the pandemic has certainly, I guess, triggered is that we're seeing more square feet per person, because even though we like these open collaborative spaces like the kitchenette, we are still having senior executives in general with taking private offices. We're having call rooms so people can have privacy when they're speaking to a client or whomever they need privacy to speak with. You know, they'll have a lot more conference and huddle rooms, but we're essentially increasing the square feet per person back from the low of about 190 square feet per person. It's never going to approach 670.
So let me jump in there, Bill,
yeah.
a little bit. So how I would relate that to what your theme is that, and this is what I do with a lot of clients, is they're looking at this cost on the space when they're not looking at the real cost is finding the right people and retaining them and making sure it's designed right, because you're not saving any money, you're costing yourself money. Joe, anything you want to ask Bill or comment on this?
One thought that's going through my head is the difference between having a small employer workspace versus the large employer. I worry about the younger people today that just strive to want to work at home. And how am I ever going to, as an executive or as an owner, going to promote them when I don't even know them? And
you're spot on, Joe. I mean, that's kind of one of the key issues is if you insist on remaining remote, I believe that you're going to miss out on growth opportunities, not just promotion, but learning. You know, I mean, I spent a huge portion of my time just trying to be around Maury as much as I could and just asking him questions and then shutting my mouth and listening to somebody like Maury. I'm going to learn. I'm going to learn so much information by talking to a guy like that. But how am I going to catch Maury if I'm never in front of him, right? He's out at meetings. He's in person, meeting with people and sharing his wisdom with others. And if I'm not there to hear it, it's going to be a lot more difficult. Maybe I can schedule a call with Maury in 2 weeks, right? But meanwhile, all those people around Maury for those 2 weeks are going to be learning and growing and improving. And so that's really a huge part of things, Joe, is one of my concerns that I share with you is that if you're not around to learn the culture, learn the business, ask questions, collaborate, troubleshoot, do these things with your coworkers and more specifically the senior leadership and more experienced team members, you're not going to grow. And if you're not growing and you're not learning, you're not going to get promoted. That's really just the facts.
When clients, Bill, ask you the basics, hey, I'm looking for a new space. I wanted to represent our culture. What are some of the basic do's and don'ts? What do you like say, okay, here's the one or two or things you absolutely have to do, and these are the one or two things you make sure you don't do?
Yeah, that's a really good question, John. A lot of people will talk about culture, but they're not always sure what their culture is. So I'll start with, well, what are your core values? And then from there, I go, what do you do with those core values? Great, you've got the core values, but maybe they're written on a wall or they're in your employee handbook, but what are you doing with those core values? Are you making them?
How does that relate to the lease?
How does that relate to the lease? Well,
yeah, it's really it's like in terms of I'm spending a lot of money on this. So what are the do's and don'ts when you're saying to me as a client, here's what you want to do with your getting the space that fits you. Let's just assume it's going to fit your culture. And what are the do's and don'ts?
Sure. Well, now the lease terms itself are very different. That has nothing to do with culture. That's total just financial dollars and cents. But the space, that's really what's going to reflect it. And so that's why I'm saying we need to understand what your culture is before we go start searching and designing for space.
Okay, good.
You see what I'm saying? So understanding who you are and who you want to be as a company plays a lot into the design. I'm sure Nora can corroborate that. You got to understand, it's not just we've got 10 people and 5 of them need offices. Well, that doesn't really do a lot to understand your culture and what you're trying to accomplish by having the space to begin with. So that's my point, John, is understanding what is your culture. And then from there, we can get to the design of the actual space.
Julian, I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name right, but any comments or questions you want to ask Bill?
Yeah, I have a couple of them. First of all, you talked about the front end with Audrey about getting out of a lease and what you can do. Can you, when you're looking for spaces and you're thinking of that culture, can you create situations in that transaction where you can get more for that company, like a build out or part of that? Is that part of what you do?
Yeah, that's a terrific question, Julian. And the answer is 100% yes. Understanding what the client is trying to accomplish is essential in leading the negotiations, because some businesses that are flush with cash, they might want to pay for their own build out and get those concessions in other ways like free rent or reduced rental rate. Well, most companies, I would say, in general, don't want to spend their cash on a build out. And so they'd rather go to the landlord and say, look, we're willing to pay a slightly higher per square foot rental rate if we can get you, the landlord, to pay for our build out that we need. And so, there's a lot of moving parts, Julian, that will create the ideal financial business terms for the tenant. And that's my job to understand how I can structure those lease terms to best support my client's needs.
And when you find the culture and you're looking at that, do you look at location also that matches that culture? Like city culture, suburbs, different parts of the city?
And it's interesting. It'll vary. That comes more into play, I would say, in retail is location being key. For office, It's really more about the team members and where they're coming from and what's convenient for them. Because what we did learn, again, back to productivity, to counterpoint myself, to argue against myself, it does take time to commute to the office, right? It might be as low as 15, 20 minutes, might be an hour or more. Well, that is part of productivity that employees are going to argue. It's like, well, am I going to spend 2 hours of my day going to and from work versus if I'm at home, now I've just saved 2 hours. So I could potentially get more work done by not going in. So that is an argument on the other side. But again, you're not going to be able to build a strong culture with the remote workforce. So back to your question about, does where the space located affect culture? I believe it does. And you got to understand where your folks are. And in general, I think, a lot of companies right now are so enamored with the West Loop, Randolph corridor. They think that's going to spur a great culture. I've argued against that for a while. There's a lot of great restaurants around there, but they're C-suite restaurants. They're not rank and file restaurants in general. There are some, but my point is, I think that there's a perception, we call it the Google effect, right? Whenever Google moves into a neighborhood, everybody wants to be near them. I really think the location has a little bit to do, but really it's more about, I think you should have a space that's convenient for the vast majority of your people to get to. That's my opinion on that, Julian.
Maury, one or two final questions, then we'll do a closing by Bill. And Bill said he'd be here a little more. So if you have other questions or things you want to do, you can ask him or reach out to him. Maury, go ahead.
Yeah, just a comment. I think that most of us are selling a product or a service. And one of the interesting things I learned last week from a new client who works on very high-end recruiting is he tells a client when they call him and give him a job position to fill, I won't do that until I spend some time in your office. I want to learn about your culture, because when I place a person in your company, I want them not only to fit the requirements of the job, I want them to fit the requirements of the culture of the company. And all of us might want to start thinking about using that as the premise for doing something for somebody, understanding their culture, so the fit of our services or our professional work fits the culture of the company. And John, Bill, this should be time for you guys to shine.
Yeah. Amy, one last question, and then we'll let the Bill do his closing.
No, I do. I feel 100% the same way, that you definitely have to go inside and visit the culture. I was just going to suggest, Audrey, what if you brought in food or did like a game or just got them involved by doing something fun, with them, where it keeps their spirits high. Maybe they get a prize for something, bring in some food, do something that's more culturally fun for them so that it makes them feel good. It's just about the warm and fuzzies right now as you're.
Such a good idea. Love that.
If you guys email me, we had the cultural tip of the month that is a very powerful thing to do. I don't want to take up time describing it right now, but if you email, I'll send it to you. Bill, what's your closing statement to people here? And then he said he would stay here a little longer, but I want to honor the time that we talked about. So what's your closing statement that you want to make to the people about it's more than an office facility, it represents your culture?
I think that Peter Drucker said, culture eats breakfast for, or what is it? Culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yeah.
And that's really where I think if you want a long-term successful business, you got to focus on the culture. And the place to do that is starting with, who you are, what are your values, how are we going to live this day to day, and how can we do this with our people together?
Yeah, great. Okay, so if you want to connect, first of all, the video, the audio, if you want this, it's available. I'll connect you all, so you'll get a follow-up email, so you can. If there's somebody, hey, Eugene, you want to talk to Bill a little more, or Bill, you want to talk to Eugene, or what?
I'll always talk to Eugene. I got time for that.
The next, and our work is built on culture being the foundation of business, foundation of life. So our next event we're doing is on the 19th. It's on the DISC profile, dealing with difficult people. Not that you ever have any difficult people in your life, but just in case. So you can come to that event. I'll send you something on that. So that's formally it. If you want to stay here and ask Bill questions, do that. Thanks for being here and getting the introduction of this important concept.
Thanks everybody for coming. Thank you, Maury, for your support.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Bill, I really want you talking about flexibility. At the end of the day, that's what